Hello, friends. Welcome back to Book Demystified once again. And today we are going to discuss about the book The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles. Now, before you roll your eyes thinking this is just another think positive thoughts and money will magically appear kind of book, let me tell you something that's going to completely shift your perspective. This isn't about wishful thinking or sitting around visualizing dollar bills floating into your bank account. This is about understanding fundamental laws of wealth creation that are as reliable and predictable as the law of gravity. Picture this scenario for a moment. You're scrolling through LinkedIn at 11 p.m. after another exhausting day at work, and you see that post from your college roommate announcing they just bought their third rental property. Meanwhile, you're sitting there calculating whether you can afford to order takeout or if you should just eat ramen again tonight. You're working just as hard as they are, maybe even harder, but somehow they seem to be operating in a completely different financial universe. What's their secret? What do they know that you don't? Here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. There actually is a science to getting rich. Not a get-rich-quick scheme, not some mystical mumbo-jumbo, but an actual systematic approach to wealth creation that works regardless of your background, education, or current financial situation. Wallace Wattles figured this out over a century ago, and the principles he discovered are more relevant today than they've ever been. Now, I know what you might be thinking. If there's really a science to getting rich, why isn't everyone wealthy? That's exactly the right question to ask, and the answer is going to surprise you. It's not because the system doesn't work. It's because most people don't understand the fundamental difference between the science of getting rich and just working hard for money. Let me share something personal with you. About 6 years ago, I was the epitome of the hard-working American who was going nowhere financially. I was putting in 50-hour weeks at my job, I had a side hustle on weekends, I was cutting coupons and shopping sales, doing everything I thought I was supposed to do to get ahead financially. But at the end of each month, I was still living paycheck to paycheck, still stressed about money, still feeling like I was running on a hamster wheel that was going nowhere. Then I discovered this book, and everything changed. Not overnight, this isn't a fairy tale, but systematically and predictably, just like Wattles promised it would. Within 3 years of applying these principles, my net worth went from basically zero to over $150,000. Within 5 years, I had built multiple income streams that gave me the freedom to choose my work based on passion rather than desperation. And the most amazing part? None of this happened through luck, inheritance, or some revolutionary business idea. It happened through understanding and applying the scientific principles that Wattles laid out in this incredible book. But here's what makes this approach so different from everything else you've probably heard about wealth building. Most financial advice focuses on tactics, budgeting techniques, investment strategies, ways to cut expenses. And while those things can be helpful, they're missing the fundamental foundation. It's like trying to build a skyscraper by focusing on the interior decorating while ignoring the structural engineering. Wallace understood something that most people miss completely. Getting rich isn't primarily about managing money or finding the right investments or cutting expenses. Getting rich is about understanding how wealth is created in the first place and then aligning yourself with those creative forces in a systematic way. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts and creates wealth rather than someone who's constantly struggling to accumulate it. Now, before we dive deep into these principles, I want you to do something for me. I want you to honestly assess your current relationship with money and wealth. Do you believe that there's only so much money to go around and that for you to get more, someone else has to have less? Do you think that wealthy people are somehow different from you, smarter, luckier, more connected? Do you find yourself feeling guilty about wanting more money, like it somehow makes you greedy or shallow? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone. These beliefs are incredibly common in our society, and they're also the biggest obstacles to wealth creation. Wallace identified these limiting beliefs over a century ago, and he showed exactly how they keep people trapped in financial mediocrity even when they're working incredibly hard. The first revolutionary concept that Wattles introduces is what he calls the science of getting rich. Now, when he uses the word science, he's not talking about chemistry or physics. He's talking about the fact that wealth creation follows predictable laws and principles, just like any other natural phenomenon. When you understand these laws and work in harmony with them, getting rich becomes as inevitable as water flowing downhill. Think about this for a moment. We live in the most prosperous society in human history. The United States has more wealth, more opportunities, more resources than any civilization that has ever existed. The average American today lives better than kings and queens did just a few hundred years ago. We have technology that would seem like magic to previous generations. We have access to global markets, instant communication, unlimited information, and economic systems that create new wealth every day.
Yet despite all of this abundance, most Americans are struggling financially. According to recent studies, over 60% of Americans couldn't handle a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. The median American household has less than $5,000 in savings. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck regardless of how much money they make. This isn't because there isn't enough wealth to go around. It's because most people don't understand the fundamental principles of how wealth is created and attracted. Wattles starts with what he calls the right to be rich. Now, this isn't about entitlement or thinking you deserve money just for existing. It's about understanding that wanting to be wealthy is natural, healthy, and actually necessary for your full development as a human being. In our society, we often have conflicted feelings about money. We want it, but we feel guilty for wanting it. We admire successful people, but we also resent them. We work for money, but we also think that focusing on money is somehow shallow or materialistic. This internal conflict is absolutely toxic to wealth creation. It's like trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. You might move forward, but you're fighting yourself every step of the way, and you'll never reach your full potential. Here's what Wattles understood that most people don't. Money is simply a tool that allows you to express your full potential and contribute your maximum value to the world. When you have financial resources, you can take care of your family better. You can pursue your passions without worrying about survival. You can contribute to causes you care about. You can develop your talents and abilities to their fullest extent. You can live a richer, fuller, more meaningful life. Let me give you a personal example of how this played out in my own life. For years, I had this internal belief that wanting to be wealthy was somehow selfish or greedy. I told myself that money wasn't important, but I just wanted to make enough to get by. But what I didn't realize was that this limiting belief was keeping me trapped in a cycle of financial struggle that actually prevented me from helping others and contributing to the world in the way I really wanted to. When I finally embraced what Wattles calls the right to be rich, everything shifted. I realized that by staying financially limited, I wasn't being noble or selfless. I was actually limiting my ability to make a positive impact. When I started building wealth systematically, I was able to help my parents with their medical expenses, contribute more to charities I cared about, invest in my own education and development, and eventually create a business that provides value to hundreds of people. The second fundamental principle that Wattles teaches is what he calls thinking in the certain way. This isn't about positive thinking or visualization exercises, although those can be part of it. This is about developing a specific mental framework that successful people use to approach wealth creation. Most people think about money from a position of scarcity. They focus on what they don't have, what they can't afford, how limited their options are. They spend their mental energy worrying about bills, calculating expenses, and figuring out how to stretch their dollars further. This scarcity mindset actually repels wealth because it keeps you focused on limitation rather than opportunity. Wattles discovered that wealthy people think differently. They think from a position of abundance. They focus on opportunities rather than obstacles. They think about creating value rather than just earning money. They approach challenges as problems to be solved rather than barriers that can't be overcome. They think about what's possible rather than what's limiting them. Now, I know this might sound like New Age nonsense, but hear me out. This isn't about pretending problems don't exist or ignoring practical realities. This is about where you direct your mental energy and attention. When you focus on scarcity, you become really good at noticing scarcity. When you focus on abundance and opportunity, you become really good at noticing abundance and opportunity. Let me share a practical example of how this works. A few years ago, I was complaining to a successful entrepreneur friend of mine about how there were no good business opportunities in my area. I was living in a smaller city, and I felt like all the real opportunities were in places like New York or San Francisco. My friend listened patiently, then asked me a simple question. What problems do you see people in your city dealing with that aren't being solved effectively? That question completely shifted my perspective. Instead of focusing on what wasn't available, I started focusing on what was needed. Within a week, I'd identified 3 different business opportunities that I hadn't noticed before simply because I wasn't looking for them. I was so focused on what was missing that I was blind to what was possible. The third principle that Wattles teachings is about acting in the certain way. This is where most people who read about wealth creation get stuck. They understand the concepts intellectually, they might even get excited about the possibilities, but they don't translate that understanding into consistent action. Here's the key insight. Knowledge without action is worthless. You can read every book about wealth creation ever written, attend every seminar, watch every YouTube video, but none of that matters if you don't actually do something different with your life. The universe responds to action, not to intentions or wishes or plans.
But here's the tricky part. It's not just about taking any action. It's about taking what Wattles calls efficient action. Action that's aligned with your goals and that moves you systematically toward wealth creation. Most people take a lot of action, but it's scattered, unfocused, and often counterproductive. Let me give you an example from my own experience. When I first started trying to build wealth, I was taking tons of action, but it was all over the place. I was trying to save money by extreme couponing. I was jumping from one side hustle to another. I was constantly researching new investment strategies, but never actually investing. I was busy, but I wasn't being effective. When I learned about efficient action, everything changed. Instead of trying to do everything, I focused on the few activities that would have the biggest impact on my wealth-building goals. I automated my savings so I didn't have to think about it every month. I chose one investment strategy and stuck with it consistently instead of constantly switching approaches. I developed one skill set that would significantly increase my earning power rather than dabbling in dozens of different areas. The result was that I actually started making real progress even though I was working less hard than before. That's the power of efficient action. It's not about doing more, it's about doing the right things consistently. The fourth principle is about understanding what Wattles calls the creative plane versus the competitive plane. This is probably the most revolutionary concept in the entire book, and it's the one that most people struggle with because it goes against everything we've been taught about success in America. Most people approach wealth creation from the competitive plane. They think that to get ahead, they have to beat someone else. They think that if they make money, someone else loses money. They approach business as a zero-sum game where there are winners and losers. This competitive mindset creates enormous stress and limitation. When you're operating from competition, you're constantly worried about what other people are doing. You're focused on defending what you have rather than creating more. You're operating from fear rather than from confidence and creativity. Wattles discovered that truly wealthy people operate from what he calls the creative plane. Instead of trying to get a bigger piece of the existing pie, they focus on making the pie bigger. Instead of competing for existing opportunities, they create new opportunities. Instead of taking value from others, they focus on creating value for others. Here's a practical example of how this works. Let's say you're working in sales and you're struggling to make your numbers. From the competitive plane, you might focus on trying to steal customers from your colleagues, or undercutting competitors on price, or using high-pressure tactics to close more deals. This approach might work in the short term, but it creates enemies, destroys relationships, and ultimately limits your long-term success. From the creative plane, you would focus on becoming so valuable to your customers that they naturally want to do business with you. You would look for ways to solve problems that your competitors aren't solving. You would build genuine relationships based on trust and mutual benefit. You would focus on creating win-win scenarios where everyone benefits from working with you. That lesson I learned in a powerful way early in my career. I was working in a competitive sales environment, and I was struggling because I was trying to use the same tactics as everyone else. I was focused on beating my colleagues and outmaneuvering competitors. It was exhausting, stressful, and not very effective. Then I shifted to the creative approach. Instead of trying to take business away from competitors, I started looking for ways to expand the market and create new opportunities. Instead of focusing on making quick sales, I focused on building long-term relationships and providing exceptional value. Instead of competing with my colleagues, I started collaborating with them and sharing ideas. The results were incredible. Not only did my sales numbers improve dramatically, but the work became enjoyable instead of stressful. I was creating value for customers, building genuine relationships, and contributing to the success of my entire team. That's the power of operating from the creative plane. Everyone wins, including you. Hey, if you're enjoying our free book summaries and want to support what we do, there are a few easy ways to help. You can subscribe to the channel, become a member, or grab the book using our affiliate link in the description. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can also leave a tip via PayPal or UPI. The link's below. Every bit of support helps us keep creating valuable content for you. Now, let's talk about what Wattles calls the grateful mind and why gratitude is actually a practical wealth-building tool, not just a feel-good concept. This is where a lot of people get confused because they think gratitude is about being satisfied with what you have and not wanting more. But that's not what Wattles is talking about at all. The grateful mind that Wattles describes is about appreciating the abundance that already exists while simultaneously working toward creating more. It's about recognizing the incredible opportunities and resources that are already available to you right now, even if you haven't fully utilized them yet.
Here's why this is so important for wealth creation. When you're constantly focused on what you don't have, what you can't do, what's wrong with your situation, you're programming your mind to notice limitation and obstacles. But when you develop genuine appreciation for what's already available to you, your mind becomes much more effective at noticing opportunities and possibilities. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works. When I was struggling financially, I used to constantly complain about my job. I focused on everything that was wrong with it: the low pay, the difficult boss, the limited opportunities for advancement. I was so focused on what was wrong that I was completely blind to the valuable skills I was developing, the connections I was making, and the opportunities that were actually available to me. When I shifted to a grateful mindset, everything changed. I started appreciating the fact that I had a steady income while I was building other opportunities. I started recognizing the valuable experience I was gaining that would help me in future roles. I started building better relationships with colleagues because I wasn't constantly negative about the workplace. Within 6 months, that shift in attitude led to opportunities and connections that I never would have noticed when I was focused on what was wrong. The fifth principle is about understanding your purpose in relation to wealth creation. This isn't about finding your life's calling or discovering your passion, although those things are valuable. This is about understanding that wealth creation is most effective when it's connected to providing value to other people. Most people approach wealth creation backwards. They think about what they want for themselves first: more money, a bigger house, a nicer car, financial security. And while there's nothing wrong with wanting those things, when that's your primary focus, wealth creation becomes much more difficult and less sustainable. Wattles discovered that wealth flows most naturally to people who are focused on creating value for others. When you're genuinely focused on solving problems, meeting needs, and improving other people's lives, wealth becomes a natural byproduct of that value creation. This principle is more relevant today than it's ever been.
In our modern economy, the people who create the most wealth are the ones who provide the most value to the most people. Think about the wealthiest people in America today. Jeff Bezos created Amazon, which makes shopping more convenient for millions of people. Bill Gates created Microsoft, which made computers more accessible and useful. Oprah Winfrey created media content that educated and inspired millions of people. These people didn't get wealthy by focusing primarily on making money. They got wealthy by focusing on creating enormous value for other people. The money followed naturally from the value they created. Now, you don't have to start the next Amazon or Microsoft to apply this principle. You can apply it in whatever work you're currently doing. The question to ask yourself is, how can I provide more value to the people I serve? Whether you're an employee, a business owner, a freelancer, or anything else, this question will guide you toward opportunities for wealth creation. I experienced this principle firsthand when I shifted from thinking about how can I make more money to how can I provide more value. When I was focused on making money, opportunities seemed scarce and difficult to find. But when I shifted to focusing on value creation, opportunities started appearing everywhere. I started noticing problems that needed solving, services that could be improved, and ways to help people more effectively. The sixth principle is about what Wattles calls receiving wealth. This is another concept that trips people up because it sounds passive, like you're just supposed to sit around and wait for wealth to come to you. But that's not what Wattles means at all. Receiving, in Wattles' framework, is about being open to and prepared for the opportunities that your creative actions generate. Many people work hard and provide value, but they're not mentally or practically prepared to receive the wealth that their efforts could create. For example, let's say you're providing excellent service in your job and creating real value for your company. Your creative efforts might generate opportunities for promotion, raises, or job offers from other companies. But if you're not mentally prepared to negotiate for higher compensation, or if you don't have the practical knowledge to evaluate different opportunities, you might not receive the wealth that your value creation deserves. Or let's say you start a side business that's providing value to customers. Your creative efforts might generate opportunities for growth, partnerships, or investment. But if you're not prepared to scale your operations, manage increased revenue, or take advantage of growth opportunities, you might not receive the full benefit of your value creation.
This is where a lot of people get stuck. They're doing the creative work, they're providing value, but they're not receiving the wealth that should naturally flow from their efforts. Sometimes this is because of limiting beliefs about what they deserve. Sometimes it's because they lack practical knowledge about money management, negotiation, or business growth. Sometimes it's because they're not paying attention to the opportunities that their efforts are creating. I learned this lesson when I started freelancing on the side while working my regular job. I was providing excellent service to clients and creating real value, but I was severely undercharging for my work because I didn't believe I deserved to charge professional rates. I was also turning down opportunities for larger projects because I didn't think I was ready for them. When I learned about the importance of receiving, I realized I was sabotaging my own wealth creation. I started charging fair rates for my services. I started saying yes to bigger opportunities, even when they felt a little scary. I started treating my side business like a real business rather than just a hobby. The result was that my income from freelancing tripled within 6 months, even though I wasn't working any harder than before. The seventh principle is about persistence and consistency in applying these methods. Wattles emphasizes that the science of getting rich isn't a magic formula that works overnight. It's a systematic approach that requires consistent application over time. This is where most people fail. They read about these principles, they get excited about the possibilities, they might even try applying them for a few weeks or months. But when they don't see immediate, dramatic results, they get discouraged and give up. They go back to their old ways of thinking and acting, and then they conclude that the principles don't work. But that's like expecting to get in shape by going to the gym for a week, or expecting to learn a language by studying for a month. The science of getting rich, like any other science, requires consistent application over time to produce results. The good news is that when you do apply these principles consistently, the results compound over time. Small changes in how you think and act create small improvements in your circumstances. Those small improvements create slightly bigger opportunities. Those bigger opportunities create even bigger improvements. Over time, this compound effect creates dramatic changes in your financial situation. I've seen this compound effect in my own life over the past 6 years. The first year of applying these principles, my progress seemed slow and incremental. I was saving a little more money, making slightly better decisions, noticing a few more opportunities. Nothing dramatic, but definite progress. By the second year, the improvement started accelerating. The skills I had developed were creating better opportunities, the relationships I had built were opening new doors, the money I had saved was creating investment opportunities. The compound effect was starting to kick in. By the fourth and fifth years, the changes were dramatic. I had built multiple income streams, developed valuable skills, created a substantial investment portfolio, and built a network of successful, like-minded people. But all of this happened gradually, through consistent application of the principles, not through any single breakthrough moment. Now, let me share with you how to practically apply these principles in your modern American life. The first step is to get crystal clear on what wealth means to you personally. For some people, wealth means having enough money to never worry about financial security. For others, it means having the freedom to pursue their passions without worrying about income. For others, it means being able to provide generously for their family and contribute to causes they care about. There's no right or wrong answer, but it's crucial that you define wealth in terms that are meaningful to you personally. When your wealth-building efforts are connected to your deepest values and desires, you'll have the motivation to persist through challenges and setbacks. Next, you need to examine your current beliefs about money and wealth. Are you operating from scarcity or abundance? Do you believe that wealth creation requires taking from others, or do you understand that it's possible to create value for everyone? Do you feel guilty about wanting financial success, or do you recognize it as a natural and healthy desire? Be honest about any limiting beliefs you discover, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. If you find beliefs that are limiting your wealth creation, start consciously replacing them with beliefs that support your financial success. Then start thinking and planning from the creative plane rather than the competitive plane. Instead of focusing on how to get a bigger piece of the existing pie, start thinking about how you can make the pie bigger. Instead of worrying about what your competitors are doing, focus on how you can provide unique value that nobody else is providing. This shift in thinking will naturally lead to opportunities that you might not have noticed before. You'll start seeing problems as opportunities to create solutions. You'll start viewing challenges as chances to develop valuable skills. You'll start approaching your work and your business from a position of creativity and abundance rather than fear and limitation.
The next step is to start taking efficient action toward your wealth-building goals. This means focusing on the few activities that will have the biggest impact, rather than trying to do everything at once. It means being strategic about how you invest your time and energy. For most people, the highest leverage activities are developing valuable skills, building meaningful relationships, and creating systems for saving and investing money. These might not provide immediate gratification, but they create the foundation for long-term wealth creation. Also, start practicing genuine gratitude for the resources and opportunities that are already available to you. This isn't about being satisfied with mediocrity or accepting less than you deserve. This is about recognizing the abundance that already exists in your life, so you can build on it more effectively. Finally, commit to persistence and consistency. Decide that you're going to apply these principles consistently for at least one full year, regardless of how quickly you see results.
Treat this as an experiment in scientific wealth creation. Track your progress. Notice what's working and what isn't. Make adjustments as needed, but don't give up before the principles have had time to work. Now, I want to address some common obstacles that people face when trying to apply these principles. The first obstacle is impatience. We live in a culture of instant gratification, and it's natural to want immediate results from your wealth-building efforts. But real wealth creation takes time, just like any other worthwhile endeavor. When you feel impatient, remember that you're building a foundation for lifelong financial success. The time and effort you invest now will pay dividends for decades to come. Focus on the progress you're making, even if it seems small, and trust the process. The second obstacle is comparison with others. Social media makes it incredibly easy to compare your financial situation with other people's highlight reels. Remember that you're seeing a curated version of other people's lives, not the full picture. Focus on your own journey and your own progress. The third obstacle is perfectionism. Some people get so caught up in finding the perfect investment strategy or the perfect business idea that they never actually take action. Remember that done is better than perfect. Start with good enough and improve as you go. The fourth obstacle is fear of failure. Many people are so afraid of making mistakes or losing money that they never take the risks necessary for wealth creation. But here's the thing. Not taking action is also a risk. It's the risk of staying where you are financially for the rest of your life. Instead of trying to avoid all risks, focus on taking smart, calculated risks that have the potential for significant upside. Start small, learn from your experiences, and gradually take bigger risks as you develop confidence and expertise. The fifth obstacle is lack of support from family and friends. Sometimes the people closest to you will be skeptical or even negative about your wealth-building efforts. This is often because they're operating from scarcity thinking, or because they're afraid that your success will somehow diminish them. Don't let other people's limitations become your limitations. Surround yourself with people who support your goals and who are also focused on creating success in their own lives. This might mean joining online communities, attending networking events, or finding mentors who can guide and encourage you. Let me share a final story that illustrates the power of these principles. About 2 years ago, I met a woman named Sarah who was working as a teacher, making about $45,000 a year. She was passionate about education, but she was struggling financially and felt limited by her salary. Sarah discovered the science of getting rich and started applying the principles systematically. Instead of complaining about low teacher salaries or looking for a completely different career, she started thinking creatively about how she could provide more educational value. She started by creating supplementary educational materials that other teachers could use in their classrooms. She focused on solving real problems that teachers faced: lack of time to create engaging materials, difficulty differentiating instruction for different learning styles, challenges with keeping students motivated. Sarah started small, selling her materials through online platforms for teachers. She focused on providing exceptional value and building relationships with her customers. She reinvested her profits into creating more materials and improving her existing products. Within 2 years, Sarah had built a business that was generating over $8,000 a month in passive income while still teaching full-time. She was able to help thousands of teachers and students around the country while also achieving the financial security she had always wanted. Sarah's success wasn't due to luck or special connections or extraordinary talent. It was due to understanding and applying the scientific principles that Wattles outlined over a century ago. She thought from abundance rather than scarcity. She operated from the creative plane rather than the competitive plane. She focused on providing value to others. She took efficient action consistently over time. She remained grateful and persistent throughout the process. The same principles that worked for Sarah are available to you right now. The same opportunities that she created are waiting for you to discover them. The only question is whether you'll have the commitment and persistence to apply these principles consistently until they produce results. As we conclude our exploration of the science of getting rich, I want you to understand that you now possess knowledge that most people never discover. You understand that wealth creation follows predictable principles. You know that it's possible to create abundance without taking from others. You recognize that your thoughts and actions have direct impact on your financial results. But knowledge without action is worthless. The principles we've discussed today have the power to completely transform your financial situation, but only if you actually apply them. Only if you make the commitment to think differently, act differently, and persist through the inevitable challenges and setbacks. The science of getting rich isn't about getting something for nothing. It's not about finding shortcuts or magic formulas. It's about understanding the fundamental laws that govern wealth creation and aligning your thoughts, actions, and habits with those laws. You live in the most abundant society in human history. You have access to opportunities that previous generations could never have imagined. You have the knowledge, tools, and resources necessary to create whatever level of wealth you truly desire. The only question is whether you'll use them. Your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. The person you'll be 5 years from now is being shaped by the thoughts you think and the actions you take right now. You have the power to make those next 5 years the most financially transformative period of your entire life. The science of getting rich is real. The principles work. The opportunity is in front of you right now. What are you going to do with it?